Peace, peace. We are back once again. Masterminds with Brother Shem-El. I'm happy to be back. First, let me just say, Masterminds. Let me just say this: that I want to extend definitely honors to everyone who has shown their support with the show, with the channel. Steadily growing. I think at this time of this day, which is November 3rd of 2019, several of my videos have done quite well, considering that I rarely promote my shows. But Noble Soul is with the brother Eric Munjin Bey. Also, especially the show with Asir, the Duke of Tears. That's my highest viewed show right now to date. In just a few months, over 4,000 views, going on 5,000, which is not a lot in YouTube world, but to have a show like this, one, and also to have a show that doesn't really cater to the mainstream, that I consider that to be an honor. And I thank each and every one of you for continued support. Before I begin with speaking on the topic and getting our special guests, very, very special guests, and I'll tell you why shortly, I want to dedicate this show to the memory of a beloved soul who transitioned last week, Sister Linda Harewood Bay, a faithful member of the Federation Moorish Science Temple of America, Incorporated. She's the temple number 3, located in New York. She was an assistant Grand Sheikess there. Beautiful soul. My prayers, my love, and my condolences to the family. Sister Diane Harewood Bay, Sister Wilhelmina Stevens Bay, her family, her sons, Michael Harewood Bay, Isaiah, everyone, all the family there. Definitely give my love and my condolences and my prayers to you all. She will definitely be missed. And of course, we know she's carrying on her works on the plane of soul. So this show is dedicated to her memory. Now, with that stated, the title of this show is The Atlantis Mystery. And on this episode, we will be talking with author, teacher, a mentor of mine, a big brother of mine, Sheik Robert Stone-El, who was the Grand Governor for the Federation Moorish Science Temple of America #2 in Durham, North Carolina, my home temple. So I'm really excited about this show here, being that it is something that I've been wanting to have for quite a long time in terms of getting him on the show. And we finally made it happen. I said it was past due. So with that said, we will be discussing his book entitled Prophet Noble Drew Ali and the Ancient Mystery of America, as well as we will be speaking on topics such as: what is Atlantis? Why is Atlantis mentioned in the Circle 7? Who are the Atlanteans? Whatever happened to Atlantis? What is the Continental Drift? Where is Atlantis now? What is the significance of Atlantis today? And much, much more. As promised, you'll be hearing from yet another influential master in Moorish science. And I just want to go ahead before I bring him on. I am going to basically just give a background story as far as how I had the opportunity of actually meeting this humble brother, teacher, Sheik, divine minister, and also having built, he's just become my brother, just point blank, period. In my journey, I've said this before, in my journey through Moorish Science, I had stumbled, like many people, um, through different things, through different avenues of information that was coming through. And while some of it was good information, a lot of it was not connected with the teachings of Noble Drew Ali. So I had the fortunate opportunity um, in Jacksonville, North Carolina, to come across a brother who I have to thank him for connecting me with Stone-El, and that is Sheik Rahim Shamari Bey. I built a friendship with him, and in turn, he connected me with Sheik Stone-El. I got a chance to come down to Durham and go to the first uh, actual Moorish Science Temple meeting. But before I even did that, they had a function at a library, a local library, and I got to see the brother demonstrate, full of wisdom, full of knowledge, but above all, he's just a good-hearted brother. There are very few people you will come across in life who will have the integrity and have the character that matches at the level of their intellect. I said you have integrity and you have intellect. Some have more intellect than integrity. He has both at a high level, and I'm forever indebted to him for all that he has done for me and my family. So without further ado, I'm going to get my brother on the line. I'm going to give him a call, and we will start this off. Go ahead here. Islam, Sheik, you are Islam. You are live on the air. So praise Allah. So we have people on the chat. They're ready to hear what you have to say. So I just gave a background story of how I met you and how I became a member of Federation Moorish Science Temple of America, #2 in Durham. So before we get into the book, as I like to do with all authors and guests on the show, I like to ask them how they got started. So I like to ask you, how did you come across Moorish Science and the teachings of Prophet Noble Drew Ali?
Islamism, praise Allah. Praise Allah. First, I want to rise, give all eternal praise to the great God of the universe, allowing all of us to be here, giving honors to his holy divine prophet, Noble Drew Ali, who brought us this great light, brought us out of darkness into the marvelous light. And I want to send special honors to the brother Nazarite, who paved the way for our founder, John the Harbinger, who paved the way for Jesus, giving honors to the Honorable Marcus Mosaic Garvey. And I want to send special honors to the Supreme Grand Resurrection, Timothy Dingle-Hill, hyphenated Noble Drew Ali, and to his other half, Supreme Grand Noblest, Mother Wisdom, Mother Louise Dingle-Hill. And I want to send special honors to their children, special honors to their daughter, Chief Supreme Grand National Secretary Diane Dingle-Hill. And I want to honor the Moor man for placing his hands in his trust in our Supreme Grand Governor, my Grand Sheik, Jerome Grand Bey, Divine Minister of the Gospel, and to my Grand Sheikess, Supreme Governors, Margaret Thompson Bey. And I want to give honors to all the Moors on the line. I want to give honors to, there's so many who've done so much, sacrificed so much in the uplifting of all of humanity. I just got news that a great Muslim passed on. We already lost one great Muslim in the form, Sister Linda Harewood Bay, Assistant Grand Governor in New York, and I want to send a special honors to the Harewood Bay, Stevie Bay family, and also want to give honors to Brother Renee Gill of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, who just passed on, just received that Brother Renee passed on, another great Moorish American Muslim, and just as the prophet teaches us, there is no death. Man is not the body nor the soul. So I just want to honor those Muslims, and I want to honor you, Sheik Shem-El, and the program that you're doing here. Honors to your family, honors to everyone.
Yes,
sir, brother. So basically, my path coming into Moorish Science was I was sparked by certain people. The main person who sparked me was my mother. My mother was the one who first told me about the Moors in history. I knew, very little about our people and how we ruled Spain for over 800 years. She was the one that first told me about the Moors. So as I grew and I heard about the Moors, heard about Prophet Noble Jew Ali, I thank her because I had a reference point, to know about the Moors in general. But Prophet Noble Jew Ali opened up my mind to vistas, to realms that I could never have conceived when I was younger. I was blessed to study under a great teacher in New Jersey at Rutgers University by the name of Ivan Van Sertima. And Ivan Van Sertima wrote a book. He edited a book called Golden Age of the Moors. And that book really sparked me. And under Professor Van Sertima, I studied about the African origins here in the Americas. He wrote the book that came before Columbus. So I was kind of getting, my interest was getting really focused as far as the Moors and our ancient presence here in the Americas, pretty thoroughly by this time. This was around 1990. Now, by 1993, I united with the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths. And through that journey, I studied really hard on the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. And in time, I saw that Elijah Muhammad, in some of his books, some of his literature, he would mention Noble Jew Ali. And at that time, I didn't know much about Noble Jew Ali, but I thought he must be very important if the messenger of Allah at that time mentioned him. So he said about Noble Jew Ali that Noble Jew Ali and Marcus Garvey were both fine Muslims. And he also said in his Theology of Time lecture that what he was striving to do was to continue the work of Noble Jew Ali. So upon investigation and in the 5%, we had to study. We had to study intently and thoroughly. But I just could not shake that Noble Jew Ali is not an important person. So I wanted to investigate further. And when I investigated, I found there were Moorish groups. There weren't any Moorish temples near me at that time when I was coming into this knowledge. By that time, I was in Greensboro, North Carolina. This was about 93. So I made contact with a brother in New York who's a well-known brother by the name of Hakeem Bey. And Hakeem Bey sent lessons and sent literature that I studied. And I really learned a lot from the brother and what he was producing, the information that he was producing, the works that he authored, Journals of the Moorish Paradigms. I studied those and studied the other lessons that he had prepared. He was a great scholar, a great teacher. But I needed more. I needed more. I said, I've got to find a temple. So about 2000, I found a temple. By that time, I was living in the D.C. area, Maryland, not far from Silver Spring, but I was living in Alexandria, Virginia at the time. And I found the Federation Moorish Science Temple of America. Grand Sheik was Jerome Grand Bay. And at that time, she was the assistant Grand Sheik. Now she's the Grand Sheik and Supreme Governor, Margaret Thompson Bay. And I called the phone. I heard this woman's voice, very peaceful, very welcoming, very kind. And she invited me to the temple, gave me directions. And ever since then, I've been in heaven. Sitting under the teachings of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali and the instructions that Jerome Grand Bay, Grand Sheik Jerome Grand Bay, had given me, as well as Grand Sheik Margaret Thompson Bay. And in that temple, I loved it. And that's why I'm here today. Because of these Moors, I'm here today. And by 2001, I moved to North Carolina. By 2003, I received a charter here in Durham, North Carolina. And 2018, still here. And I've been blessed to keep the doors open and have great Muslims here in Durham to help me keep these doors open and to express this light, this message that Noble Jew Ali has given. And it's just been an honor, and that's basically how I got here.
Islam, praise Allah.
Islam, praise Allah.
Praise Allah. And your story is, as far as you meeting the Supreme Grand Governor Jerome Grand Bay, just how you described it, from me hearing it, it parallels the feeling that I got when I met you.
Oh, Islam.
So praise Allah, Lord governs all events. And I would be remiss if I did not mention our fellow Sheik brother in the temple, Assistant Grand Governor, Brother Robert Page L. Because I have to give him honor. He doesn't get enough honor, because him along with yourself, you two are staples in the temple. You constantly inspire me to also be a staple in the temple. Islam, as well as our sister, Sister Wilhelmina Stevens Bay.
Yes, sir.
Just faithful Moors, period.
Oh, yeah.
So, Islam.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Sheik Page L is, as you call him, we call him, he's the gatekeeper. He's there consistently, always.
Yes.
You can always depend on Sheik Page L. Divine Minister is always there. Wherever you call him, you meet him, he's there. He is a rock solid Moor.
Yes.
He is a true Moor.
Yes.
And I couldn't do what I'm doing without him, without yourself, without Sister Wilhelmina, without all the great Moors that are here in Durham, but also the great Moors that I've met outside of Durham, who we build together. We're on a divine mission, and I'm grateful for everyone that I've met along the way, because I'm a student of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali. I'm striving to learn, striving to know how to master self, how to know thyself. This is a constant demonstration, constant journey. And one thing about Moorish Science is if a person ever says, I've learned all there is to know in Moorish Science, I need to move on from that. That person is not learning the truth yet. They haven't come into the everlasting gospel. And that's one thing I have to distinguish between before I joined the temple. I say I learned about Moorish Science. I learned about the science of the Moors before I joined the temple, but I did not know about the everlasting gospel until I came into the temple. And that's what sustains me. And that's what I think sustains, the majority of really good Moorish Americans all over the country.
Islam. I agree. I totally agree. It is the everlasting gospel. It's that spirit of truth,
That's right.
And truth cannot change nor pass away. So, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And likewise, one of the manifestations of truth is your book, which we are going to get into. Islam. So without further ado, the name of your book is Prophet Noble Drew Ali and the Ancient Mystery of America.
That's right.
Islam. And just a quick question. What inspired you to write this book?
Islam. Well, what inspired me to write this book is my Grand Sheik, actually. My Grand Sheik, Supreme Grand Governor Jerome Graham Bey, inspired me to write this book. Because the Moor and the Supreme Grand Sheik, they are a constant source of inspiration to me. But Supreme Grand Governor Jerome Graham Bey, many years ago, he painted a map of the world. Actually, it was a map of the Asiatic world. And in that map, he was demonstrating chapter 47 in our Holy Quran of the Moorish Science of America, divinely prepared by the noble prophet Drew Ali. In that beautiful, intensely informative chapter, Noble Drew Ali is giving us a landscape of the ancient world, the ancient Asiatic world. And Supreme Grand Governor was in a contest. It was a contest within the temple, between him and another student, another Moorish American in the temple, as far as who could draw a picture of the 47th chapter. And lo and behold, Supreme Grand Governor, he won out, man. He won out. You know what I'm saying? And you've seen the map, you know what I'm saying? So you can you can see why, So that's what inspired me, the teachings that he's given us, based off that map. So what I wanted to do is go into some of that history, because I can only really give a fraction of the light that he has shined through that map. But from my little portion, I wanted to go as far as I could in that. And I wanted to go in a way that was not just a simple repetition of what other great masters had done before. Like I said, Brother Hakeem Bey, he published many paradigms, did an excellent job as far as, showing the indigenous presence of the Moors in the Americas. Did an excellent job. Of course, Jose Pimienta Bey and Professor Jose Pimienta Bey. And, like I said, the work of Dr. Van Sertima. But what I was looking at from the perspective of Noble Drew Ali, what our founder taught us, he didn't give a whole lot of dates and things of that nature in the teachings, but the dates in the history and the years specific that he did give, they are significant, And one thing I wanted to look at was that over 10,000-year demonstration. You know what I'm saying? He asked us the questions about the Moorish flag. He asked in the questionnaire, how old is our flag? You know, first of all, he said, what kind of flag is the Moorish? And it is a red flag with a 5-pointed green star in the sun. He asked us, what do the 5 points represent? Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And he asked us, how old is our flag? It is over 10,000 years old. That over 10,000 years old, that was a realm that I wanted to look at. And when you start dealing with 10,000 years of history with regards to civilization and the mothers and fathers of civilization, you know, what are we kind of talking about? Where does that put us? You know, when we deal within that range. And when we get into the Prophet Nubuju Ali's teaching, he's taking us, like I kind of said before, he's taking us into a whole new realm. It's new, but it's old. You know, just like our religion. It's an old time religion. This is an ancient religion, an ancient system, an everlasting gospel. If it's everlasting, that means it's ancient, that Nubuju Ali brought us. And looking at that, I was trying to find where and what parallels off with this ancient aspect of our history. I mean, you know, much has been written about, you know, our time in Andalus, Spain. And there's still much to be plumbed with that. Much has been written about, you know, the times of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and those that came after Prophet Muhammad, in terms of far as the Islamic and the Islamic Moorish civilization. But when we talk about, you know, 10,000 years, 25,000 years, 35,000 years, 50,000 years, that's something. That's another ball game right there. That's another whole realm. So I was inspired to look at that, and in looking at that, I said, okay, where do these dates correspond to? And in looking at that, one has to go into esoteric history. One has to go into the esoteric historical tradition versus what is termed the exoteric historical tradition. Now, with the exoteric historical tradition, you have, I say, what we say as with regards to religion, you have what might be stated as biblical history. And in dealing with biblical history, we have in that what we might call, according to the Bible that many of us have today, our Holy Bible, is based off a chronology called the Usher chronology.
Islam.
And most of us can find that Usher chronology if we have a good Bible, right? We have, for example, a good old Schofield Bible. You have a good old Schofield Bible or just a good King James Bible, you will see the beginning. You go to the book of Genesis, and it has the beginning. Yes, ma'am. And the beginning is usually in those old Schofield Bibles, those old Bibles that have the Usher chronology, the beginning of Genesis, which many see as the beginning of life or the beginning of the world. The date is 4004 BC. So in the exoteric tradition, you're talking about 6,000 years of history that they don't go beyond within that tradition. Now, right. Science has kind of blown that out the water, and science may go back, much, much further. But even when science goes back further, I'm talking about the science of the establishment of these, major institutions. And most of them following, what I would say basically is a European line of thought. Now, when they go back, they may go back thousands of years, But when they go back and they identify the life form, and I say life form because many times when they go back these 10 and 20, 30,000, 50,000 years of history and beyond, it's a form that doesn't resemble what we see today. Islam.
Right, Islam.
And especially if they go back, they say, okay, the beginning of life, and then they take you back to like an ape-like creature. So, you know, I just wanted to go past that. I didn't want to accept that the way they presented it. You know, the prophet said, man knows not by being told. I didn't want to just accept that. You know, I wanted to investigate myself. And that's what led me to this book.
Islam.
That I did, right?
Islam, praise Allah. And definitely that makes all the sense in the world to go back to the very beginning. You know, and that's what you definitely did. You brought it back with this book. So I want to start off using going into chapter 2, which actually draws from of your book, chapter 2 of your book, which draws from chapter 47, which you just mentioned, of our Moorish Holy Quran. So I'm going to read it and then we'll just proceed from there. So it says on page 12 in chapter 2, in chapter 47, in chapter 45 of the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America, the great ancient American historical narrative is revealed for the first time in ages. Egypt, the capital empire of the Dominion in Africa. The inhabitants of Africa are the descendants of the ancient Canaanites from the land of Canaan. Old man Cush and his family are the first inhabitants of Africa who came from the land of Canaan. His father Ham and his family were second. Then came the word Ethiopia, which means the demarcation line of the dominion of Amexem, the first true and divine name of Africa, the dividing of the land between the Father and the Son. The dominion of Cush, northeast and southeast Africa, and northwest and southwest was his father's dominion of Africa. In later years, many of their brethren from Asia and the Holy Lands joined them. The Moabites from the land of Moab, who received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit northwest Africa. They were the founders and are the true possessors of the present Moroccan Empire, with their Canaanite, Hittite, and Amorite brethren who sojourned from the land of Canaan seeking new homes. Their dominion and inhabitation extended from northeast and southwest Africa across the great Atlantis, even unto the present North, South, and Central America, and also Mexico and the Atlantis Islands, before the great earthquake which caused the great Atlantic Ocean. The river Nile was dredged and made by the ancient pharaohs of Egypt in order to trade with the surrounding kingdoms. Also, the Niger River was dredged by the great pharaoh of Egypt in those ancient days for trade, and it extends eastward from the river Nile, westward across the great Atlantic. It was used for trade and transportation. Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America, chapter 47, verses 1 to 8. And then you go on later to say that this narrative is profound and will be revisited again in subsequent pamphlets in this series. So with that, on page 14, I just want to read this real quick to give context and then ask you the question. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that there exists people of the land of doubt who may not see the truth of Noble Drew Ali's history, which presents and situates Muslims in America prior to the coming of Europeans. However, the scholars of truth again bear witness, and you give an excerpt. The following excerpt is as follows. We could hardly expect indeed to find in these maps of the Ptolemy of 1513 the results of Balboa's discovery at this isthmus, but that the maps were left to do service in the edition of 1520 indicates that the discovery of the South Sea had by no means unsettled the public mind as to the Asiatic connection of the regions both north and south of the Antilles. Within the next few years, several maps indicated the enduring strength of this conviction. A Portuguese Portolano of 1516 to 1520 in the Royal Library at Munich shows Muslim flags on the coast of Venezuela and Nicaragua. And this is from Geographical Results, page 584. And then you mentioned that Prophet Noble Ali knew something that the wise of the world did not discover openly until much later. In the 1960s, two Mexican archaeologists found stone tools at several sites located 75 miles southeast of Mexico City that had been occupied in 250,000 BC. So in that section right there, you go into what you just mentioned about the ancient history that goes before the Bible history account chronology as they give it, which gives you, pretty much about 6,000, approximately 6,000 years of history. So the question that I wanted to ask in connection with this, the chapter that we went on, particularly chapter 47, is what is Atlantis and why, according to your research, why is it mentioned in the Circle 7?
Islam, yes sir. That's an excellent question. And see, there's so much that surrounds Atlantis. Mostly myth. When we talk about Atlantis, a lot of times we talk about it as an island. They even have a resort now in, I guess, the Bahamas called Atlantis, right?
Yes.
And, it's a resort island and all of this and all of that. But what the Prophet Noble Ali gives us in chapter 47 is showing that, Atlantis originally was way more than a mere island. That the islands were part of Atlantis. And that Atlantis was actually an ancient geographical area. It was basically a continent that existed, thousands of years ago. And when we talk about an island of Atlantis, we're actually talking about many different catastrophes that happened that produced what later became remnants of Atlantis in the islands that we have today in the Caribbean. But I'm going to read a little bit from Plato, because that's where we first get the account of Atlantis, was from a tradition that Plato had given. Now, Plato's teacher was known as Socrates, and many of these people who were known as the Greek philosophers, we learned through the book Stolen Legacy by George D.M. James. Many of them were students in the mystery schools of Egypt and actually have received their knowledge from Egypt. And Egypt, the surviving priest that many of the Greeks had come in contact with was a priest named Athena. And the surviving priest, it actually gave them the history of Atlantis. Now, this is from Plato's account of Atlantis. I'm going to read a little bit about it, just a few excerpts. regarding this continent. He said, now, in the island of Atlantis, there was a great and wonderful empire which had ruled over the whole island and several others, as well as over parts of the continent. So it was a continent and it contained, and there were islands there. And besides these, they subjected parts of Libya within the columns of Heracles as far as Egypt, and of Europe as far as Tyrannia. Now, Libya is significant because that's one of the older names of Africa. The Prophet Noble Jew Ali even mentioned about the ancient Moabites, Hittites, Canaanites from the land of Canaan who found the kingdom. And some of these kingdoms were, as mentioned in our Holy Quran on page 3, the Prophet mentions about the Moabites, the Hamathites, the Canaanites, who were driven out of the land of Canaan by Joshua, who received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle in that portion of Egypt. In later years, they formed themselves kingdoms. These kingdoms are called this day Morocco, Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli. Tripoli is in what's known as Libya. Now, let's see. And within the columns of Heracles, as far as Egypt, the columns of Heracles is what today is referred to as basically the Rock of Gibraltar. And from the columns of Heracles, or the Rock of Gibraltar, people would set out from Africa into the Atlantic Ocean, and that would take them to the west. Now, Plato's account goes on to say that this power came forth out of the Atlantic Ocean. For in those days, the Atlantic was navigable, and there was an island situated in front of the straits, which you call the columns of Heracles. The island was larger than Libya and Asia put together. So, if it's an island, we're not talking about a small island. It's really a huge landmass. What we would deem a continent nowadays, if it's larger than Libya, which was Africa, and Asia put together. And it was the way to other islands. And from the islands, you might pass through the whole of the opposite continent, which surrounded the true ocean. For this sea, which is within the Straits of Heracles, is only a harbor, having a narrow entrance, but that the other is a real sea, and the surrounding land may be truly called a continent. So we're saying that really this was a continent in the Atlantic Ocean. And it's significant in chapter 47 because in ancient times, this was the way that we came from the east unto the west into North, South, and Central America. The prophet mentions about the great pharaohs of Egypt who dredged rivers. Now, these rivers were dredged through the continent of Africa, through what the modern name is Africa, but the ancient name is Mexico. And these rivers drew from said Africa today, the Niger River, and they cut clear across this continent that was in the Atlantic Ocean. Nowadays, that continent is no longer there. It's sunken. The prophet mentions about a great earthquake. So there were cataclysms that happened at different periods of time. The last period of time was about probably around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. But there were other cataclysms before that. But these rivers were dredged clear across this continent that was in the ocean. But now that the continent isn't there, those rivers, the existence of those rivers still exist. But they exist as currents that go across from Africa and they go straight into the Gulf of Mexico to this day. This is how we used to have, well, actually, they follow the same pathway. Hurricanes today follow the same pathway of the Niger River that cuts across the Atlantic Ocean. Those rivers that were part of the landmass still exist in the ocean. They're still there as currents now, and those currents take people from the west coast of Africa today clear to America today. That's how those explorers came over here, getting them those trade winds, those currents that take them clear across the Atlantic Ocean. And there's also trade winds and currents that take you back to the east or back to the north through Europe. So the pharaohs of Egypt had dredged these highways that still exist today. Those currents that was in those biblical rivers still exist today. And that's a portion of what Plato had given on Atlantis that he had gotten from Solon, who had gotten it from those who had studied under the Egyptian priests and scholars in Egypt. So that's a portion why, it's in chapter 47 because it's very significant. Now, when we talk about the chapter itself, Egypt, the capital empire of the Dominion over Mexico, or the Dominion of Africa, Egypt itself was a colony of something. And that which Egypt was a colony of was Atlantis. Atlantis was the great master empire in its day. And in ancient times, anterior to what we're talking about here, Atlantis itself was a colony of something else that was greater before it. But what the prophet is showing us is the succession of these capitals of this empire. And in due time, as it is explained in the book Stone and Legacy, the Moors actually became that next line of that empire, Islam. So it was a succession of ways, but the Prophet Noble Ali is taking us back to that specific era of time, dealing with when Egypt was the capital of that empire. And the relationship of Atlantis to Egypt is tremendously important. In our Holy Quran, the Prophet teaches us about how every nation has a name for Allah or God, and one nation may call him Zeus, one nation may call him Parabron, one nation may call him Thoth. Now, these names that the prophet gives us in the Holy Quran, they're very important, very, very important, very instructive names, because Thoth, we can associate Thoth with in the Kemetic system with Tehuti, Thoth. But however, Thoth, according to the history, he came from Atlantis. Islam. He came from Atlantis into Egypt. And in Egypt, there's a temple dedicated to Thoth, which is where John the Baptist went to school. And it's fitting that, Matheno, who was his instructor, took him to that school, and it was of that same line of priests who told the Greeks about Atlantis. So Atlantis is very significant from a spiritual standpoint in the Holy Quran and from a historical standpoint with its relationship to Egypt and its relationship to the ancient Moabites. There's a deep relationship in history with Atlantis to the ancient Moabites as well. But yeah, I hope I answered your question. But if you have any other questions, I'll go into that.
Islam, you definitely answered it. And which brings me to kind of I was going to say a two-part question, but it actually is probably more than a two-part question, because you mentioned in the start that Atlantis has been presented pretty much as a myth.
Right.
And in your book, you go into the actual Atlanteans and the sciences that they had. And you kind of went into that as well in your answer. So before we get deep into the Atlanteans per se, I would like to ask you, this is a two-part question. One, why do you think, based on your research, that the account of Atlantis has been hidden and suppressed? And two, why is it that when there are depictions of Atlanteans, that they look the way they look? I'll just put it like that. If you can go into it.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, but I'm getting older, but I'm young enough to remember cartoons and things of that nature, and seeing images of Atlantis, with people swimming on the water, blonde hair,
right,
blue eyes, and all of that. Well, when I started, in my studies, also studied. I studied, study all nations, and studying some of that Germanic history, and I think that's really where a lot of that comes from. A lot of that comes from the fascination that the Goths, the Visigoths had with these old histories, and they wanted to connect themselves to Atlantis, and they even placed Atlantis closer to Europe in their by trying to connect with it. If you study Hitler, during the World War, and some of the influences that influenced Hitler were a lot of these secret orders, these Germanic orders, and one of them was called the Durham Society. And in their demonstration, that's where they wanted to connect themselves to that. Using scripture from the book of Romans, they wanted to graft themselves onto the olive branch, and in science, the olive branch is us, is the Asiatic nations. That's why the prophet had to give us the divine origin of the Asiatic nations. He had to teach us the truth about who we were, where we stood in the founding of our present day civilization. But I think a lot of those depictions are their effort to connect themselves, or to, like I said, to use the words in the book of Romans, they wanted to graft themselves onto that history. And we've seen that in many different ways. They've done it in Egypt. They've done it anywhere where, there's been great civilization. That's been their effort to do that. It's a part of that European psychology, unfortunately, to kind of claim jump really what they don't have a connection to, and then try to basically degrade the true inheritors of those traditions, which is our people, which are the ancient Moabites. Today, we are the ancient Moabites. We are what our fathers were without a doubt of contradiction. And so, praise Allah for Prophet Noble Jew Ali for tying us back into the vine, bringing us back into the congregation of the Lord, through this great light, this great knowledge, on a spiritual level, most importantly, but also on a historical, on a physical plane as well. So that's why I think that aspect comes from, in regards to how they are depicted. But yeah, like we said, I guess another reason is to disconnect us from our illustrious foreparents with the founders of civilization. One of the chief books on Atlantis that came out for the layman, or let's say for the public, because a lot of things about Atlantis and its parent civilization, which is called Mound, were kept behind the scenes. Many is part of what I was talking about, that esoteric historic tradition. A lot of that was kept back, but then the time came and some of that started to come out. Now, one of the main authors of Atlantis that really went into Atlantis was a man by the name of Ignatius Donnelly. And anybody who hasn't had a chance to read his record is very highly advised they read it. They check it out. Now, Ignatius Donnelly's record was entered into the Library of Congress. And in addition to that, Ignatius Donnelly, all that he put in his record is significant because not only was he an author, but he was a member of the House of Representatives of the United States. He was in this government, in this said government, and he wrote this record. He produced this book. And thanks to our prophet Noble Drew Ali, we learned how to read a lot of historical records and read between the lines. Because many of these authors did not write these books for those who cling to the names of Negro, Black, Colored, etc. Those who cling to those names, when they read these types of books, they may find some offense in it because they don't see a connection with Negro in these books or Black in these books, and these authors may say certain things about Negroes or Black people in these books as well. But see, through our Holy Prophet Noble Drew Ali, by teaching us our nationality and teaching us, giving us this ancient history where we can tie ourselves back to our forebears, how we can trace ourselves back, knowing that, yes, we are Moorish Americans today, but we know our ancient name is Moabites. And how the Moabites is going to take us back to the land of Canaan. How in the land of Canaan is going to take us back to many other tribes and nations that were our brother tribes. Some of them we had a definite relationship to. And through those names, how we can find ourselves in these other records. But that's why it's so important to proclaim our nationality so that we can trace ourselves back, how we can find ourselves, because the way that a lot of these records are preserved, it's going to be difficult unless the author comes out. And some of them have. Some of them have. Like if you read the works of J.A. Rogers, he quotes some who talk about Negroes being in Atlantis, that these original Atlanteans were Negroes. But we know that we don't accept those names. But those names are there kind of as a signpost, etc. But, following the Prophet Noble Drew Ali's line is just a much clearer path, to the truth. We won't get caught up in these pitfalls along the way. And I think that that's part of the reason why this knowledge on Atlantis, wasn't known. It's not put out there like that. It is definitely not put out in there for the average brother or sister to be able to make that connection, because the average brother or sister just may not know how to connect themselves to these illustrious founders of civilization. Let me use a case in point. Okay, Poseidon. We get Atlantis from Poseidon. All right. Now Poseidon, many say, that was a Greek god. He was a European. I think those statues. I know what they look like. Poseidon's brother Zeus. Zeus is mentioned in the Holy Quran, right?
Right.
All right. According to history, even to the Greek history, Zeus was born not even on Mount Olympus in Greece. Zeus was born in Ethiopia. So the word Ethiopia, we know that that was a mark that was put upon us, but by knowing that the mark that was put upon us, we also know that Zeus was born in Ethiopia, and Zeus was a Cushite, number one.
Right.
We know that he was an Asiatic, number two. And if Poseidon is the brother of Zeus, we know that Poseidon was an Asiatic, number three. And, you know, there's histories that show that the temples of Poseidon, where they originated, was in what we would now say within our system, with what Prophet Nobuju Ali, Poseidon temples and things would have been in the land of Cush. They would have gone from, like, said Abyssinia today on into, said India today. And that's where the first temples of Poseidon were. So these are Asiatic people, is what I'm saying. And unless we're able to make those connections, we could be reading this all day long and not know that. So Poseidon has 5 sons. No. 10 sons, excuse me. 5 pairs of twins. Right, five twins. Yeah. 10 sons, 5 pairs. And the oldest son is named Atlas. Now, Atlas is known in mythology as the one who has the world upon his shoulders. Atlas was the eldest of these 10 sons, and that's where the name Atlantis came from, in honor of the eldest son who ruled over the others. You know, each one had their own division within that dominion at that era of time. But, you know, suffice to say that this is part of the reason why a lot of this was kept back. You know, if you think about, you know, the whole history of slavery, they could not enlighten our people to this demonstration. You know, it wasn't until Nobuju Ali came, the revealer of the light, who brought us our true records to teach us these things. And, you know, that's my measure on that. Why it's not known. Because it has so great a significance, you know? I mean, a huge significance.
Islam. And you mentioned Atlas. Does that have any relation to the Atlas Mountains that run from? Can you speak on that?
Yes, ma'am. That's a master point. Yes, sir. Yeah, the Atlas Mountains, and that's why I was saying earlier that there's a strong connection between the Moors, ancient Moabites, and Atlantis. Okay, the Atlas Mountain range runs from Morocco, what we call said Morocco today, to Northwest Africa. It runs from there clear across the ocean floor to the Americas today. That is an old ancient mountain range. And yes, the Atlas Mountains, you know, that's a remnant of Atlantis, you know, named after the eldest son of Poseidon. So that's very significant. One of the misnomers, we know, like, we have many misnomers for our people: Negro, black, colored, coon, shine, jigaboo. All of these misnomers that we have on our people today. But we had misnomers on our people in ancient times as well, the ancient Moabites. Some of the misnomers for the ancient Moabites in ancient times was Phoenician, which was a misnomer. Phoenician meant purple. It was based off of purple dye. But the Phoenicians were the ancient Moabite navigators. They were the ones that were employed to be the navy of nations. We were like the merchant marine, the navy. We were the navy of the pharaohs, the seafaring lords, or ancient Moabites. We also had Moabites that maintain on inland as well. Not all of us were in the sea, but that was a major part of our of the maritime portion of the ancient Moabites, these Phoenicians. Another misnomer for the ancient Moabites is Berber, Berber. That was another misnomer. Now, the people that are called Berbers today are actually descendants of the ancient Moabites. And many of them are in Morocco, Senegal, and other places in South Africa. But in the tradition and the history of Morocco, the said Berbers, who are the ancient Moabites, have a tradition that they actually descended from Atlantis.
Islam.
I'm gonna read from a book. It's a modern book. It's called Morocco Past and Present. But in it, it has a few legends. I'm just going to read a portion of that. It says, legend recounts that Morocco's history began when the ancestors of the Berber tribes arrived in the country from Atlantis, which used to be connected to the current ocean coast. So even the authors here, as most Americans, when we read, we gotta measure all the lines, using what the prophet gave us, using our questionnaire, using our Holy Quran. We got to use the tools that the prophet gave us to shed light and bring out the truth. In a lot of what we read and a lot of what we see, there's truth and falsehood strangely mixed. But when we read this, I'm going to just read that sentence again. It says, legend recounts that the Morocco's history began when the ancestors of the Berber tribe, that's key right there. We are the ancestors of the Berber tribe because we are the ancient Moabites. So the Berber was a misnomer, but they're saying that they arrived in the country from the continent Atlantis, which used to be connected to the ocean coast. And it says, let's see, numerous inscriptions found in the high Atlas and migrations of these people who were these first inhabitants, the original lords of Northwest Africa. That's who they were, but they were connected to Atlantis. So that's even within the histories today in Morocco, that there's a connection between Atlantis and Morocco. And, that squarely puts us in there, as the ancient Moabite, because we migrated from so many places. And
That's right.
There's a big stream of migration for the ancient Moabite. And, if you study like the history, like I was saying, of Thoth, you'll find out that Thoth was an Atlantean that came from Atlantis. And it's interesting. You remember that movie, The Gods of Egypt, that came out?
Yes.
Okay, so all the gods of Egypt were European, right?
Right.
Except one. Thoth, the brother who played Thoth. Chadwick Boseman, who played Black Panther, was Thoth.
Yes.
He was the only one that was Asiatic, And Thoth, coming from the Atlantean realm, or from the Atlantean land, and bringing those teachings into Egypt, was among one of the more ancient deities or God-men, to come into that demonstration. And from Thoth, we get the Hermetic principle. That's where, that's like a modern name for Thoth, for Tahuti is Hermes. That's one of the modern names, but that's where we get the Hermetic principle and everything. And like I said, it goes deeper than that when you deal with in our Holy Quran, the temple in our Holy Quran that's dedicated to Thoth.
Indeed. Islam. So who were the Atlanteans in a nutshell? Overall, if you can expound on the Atlanteans, who were they? Who were these people?
Right. Well, in essence, they were us. Ma'am. In essence, they were Asiatics who had a civilization there in the Atlantic Ocean, and this landmass, Atlantis, that had been there for, according to some records, had been there for over 50,000 years, over 50,000. And over a period of time, there were different cataclysms that caused them to migrate to different places. And some of them migrated into, like said, Mexico, and went from there and migrated further into said America today, the United States. One of those people that came from Atlantis would have been known as the, in modern term they call them Mayan, but they were known as the Mayaks in ancient times. And those would have been one of these colonies that had come from Atlantis. So there were different migrations of these people. That's what we can tell who these people were by where these people went, and who consisted of those migratory ways of those people. So, for example, like I said, Thoth represented a portion of that Atlantean civilization that left Atlantis and went into Egypt. The ancient Moabites in Morocco have that legend of those who left Atlantis and went into northwest Africa and went into Morocco. Those native tribes here in the Americas have the tradition as well of those who came from Atlantis and went into the Gulf of Mexico, and then eventually made their way up the Mississippi River. And those people would be known today as the Mound builders, many of them who had come from Atlantis. So that's basically, how we determine who those people were. But they were what we would term today, like I said, they would be Asiatic peoples, the people from Atlantis. They were known to have had a grand civilization, and many of those teachings and traditions that they had survived in those people that migrated from there. They took that with them into the new lands where they went. But as far as like another remnant of them would be in the islands that exist today in the Caribbean, as well as the northern portion of Atlantis would be what we call Greenland. Greenland would be the northern portion of Atlantis today, the part that didn't sink in the Atlantic Ocean, that wasn't affected by these cataclysms that happened. And, the most recent cataclysm was the one that happened about, 11,000, 10,000 BC. But yeah, so that's who those people are. People of Atlantis, they're us today.
Islam. Now, you mentioned the Mayans. I just want to read a section of your book, page 24. And in this page, it actually has the picture of the Olmec head up on top. It says, quote, "The sacred records of the Mayas are recorded in their ancient writings called Popol Vuh. It contained information on the Quichimaya, while the Chilambalam writings preserve the works of the Yucatec Maya. The mention of these two ancient books is important because the Yucatan is also the location of one of the Atlantean Hall of Records. According to the book, The Lost Hall of Records, quote, identification of the Yucatan is as one of the three places where an Atlantean Hall of Records can still be found. These records are said to contain a history of the origins of humanity up to Atlantean times, and that's page 15 of that book. So, so there's a connection with what you're saying, is that there's a connection between the account of the Atlanteans and the Mayans, specifically the Yucatan Mayans. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, there's that connection. That's see these basically once these people migrated, they took that portion of knowledge with them, and they preserved that knowledge. Just like as with the history of thought going to Egypt, there was a lot of knowledge preserved. Those Hall of Records, there's two geographical places where it is believed that those Hall of Records exist. There may be others, but one being in the Yucatan, which was a major civilization here in the Americas, and the other being in Egypt beneath the paw of the Sphinx. That was the other place where the Atlantean records were preserved. And yeah, the Maya really, even when you deal with the Olmec is a modern term. It's a misnomer. Just as we speak about Berber for the ancient Moabites, Negro, black, and colored for us today. In ancient times, for these Atlanteans, that's another misnomer. It's Olmec. Olmec just simply means rubber. And they were saying that these were the rubber people because they came from the areas in Mexico where rubber trees were. And it was a place in Mexico in the Yucatan called Tres Zapotes, meaning the three shoes. And that's where, was a major place for the Olmec civilization. But really the Olmec, when you see the Olmec, you're looking at the ancient Mayak. And that civilization goes back thousands of years itself. It goes back over 11,000 years. And when we deal with the Americas, we're dealing with a place where there were many migratory waves of ancient peoples, and especially in that area of the Gulf of Mexico and Yucatan. That's where colonists from Atlantis went over the period of time where they had the succession of destructions. Because remember, Atlantis originally was a continent, but by the time, say, 11,000 years ago, yeah, you're talking about an island, basically. You're talking about, different cataclysms that happened that brought that continent under the ocean. So, but in that transition of time, these colonists went to the Americas. Many of them found themselves in that Yucatan. But simultaneously, there was a migration of colonists coming from further west, in the far west, in an area which is called Mound. And so these colonists came together these areas and founded this, this civilization in the Yucatan, in the Gulf of Mexico, and from there they migrated into around the area of the Mississippi and found their way up the Mississippi River. That's where you get a lot of the mound building civilization, where they came from. The mound builders is directly connected to these colonists that came from Atlantis and from you.
Islam. So you mentioned the mound builders, and I definitely would have wanted to speak on that. Because we know that there, for those who know, there's many actual mounds in not only in Central America, but in North America, in this country, North Carolina, Alabama, just all throughout. So to that point, who were the mound builders, and what was the science about building the mounds?
Yes, sir. Yeah, the mound builders were descendants of these colonists that had come from Mu and come from Atlantis. Now, just step back. Mu was a civilization that was in the Pacific Ocean, and Mu is estimated actually to be older than Atlantis. And many of the migrants from Mu ended up in the West Coast, like California. And some of them migrated further inland into Arizona. And in Arizona, you have history. There was a newspaper article dated 1909 about what the Smithsonian had found in the Grand Canyon. It found an Egyptian city in the Grand Canyon and described that. But those would have been those colonists that had come from Mu on that side. Mu also had a grand cataclysm that caused its submersion and destruction. And there's a lot of geological reference that ties into that as well. There were scientists who studied about the origin of continents and oceans. In other words, continental drift. And scientists, had also included about Mu in their works. They didn't call it by that name, but there's a lot of scientific evidence that ties into that. But suffice to say, that's where a lot of the colonists had come from the West Coast into California. And we know that it's ancient because the findings of those, archaeologists had found these civilizations in California, which date back 300,000 years ago. So that ties to a really ancient history and migration of these people. But they had also come through from the Pacific Ocean side through Mexico and South America and had made their way up. And let's see, in some of the maps, that were given by like historians like James Churchward, who explained the migration of those that had come from Mu through South America, it's interesting that they come through what he calls on his map, the Negroid line of migration. And it's interesting because it ties to our Holy Prophet's teachings about the Negro River. Now, he asked us a question about the word Negro, a question and a statement. And our question there, he says Negro, a name given to a river in West Africa by Moors because it contains black water. Now, as far as how we've been taught, when the prophet is talking about the Negro River, he's not talking about the Niger River because he already gives us the history of the Niger River in chapter 47. So he's specifically talking about another river, which is in West Africa. Now we know that the modern name for Mexium is Africa. And that when we talk about a Mexium, we're not talking about just like said Africa today, we're talking about the Americas. So the Negro River, we actually find that in South America. And if you look at the maps that James Churchward had produced, the Negroid line levels off with the Negro River. Islam. So these were like routes of immigration, routes that those colonists from Mew had taken and come into the Americas. And we also had the routes that the Atlanteans had come into the Americas. So basically what we have in the Gulf of Mexico, in the Yucatan, we have, we got an amalgamation of those from Mew and those from Atlantis coming in together. And see, there's a historical tradition that had existed between these two because just as, for example, Egypt was the capital empire in its time. But prior to that, Atlantis was the capital empire. The capital empire had relations with all of the nations that were subject to it. So every nation that was subject to Egypt has relations with Egypt, according to chapter 47. Now, in modern times, say for example, you got the British Empire or other empires that has relations with those countries that are subject to it. So that's basically the same relationship that existed between Atlantis when it was in that position of power and Egypt, as well as Mew in the position that it existed with Atlantis and Egypt. But so in the Gulf of Mexium is where these colonists had come together. And right at the foot of the Gulf of Mexium, or the Gulf of Mexico, as it's called today, is the mouth of the Mississippi River. Now, the Mississippi is one of the few rivers that flow upstream. And that was due to to certain cataclysms, the Ice Age, that had changed the course and natures of the rivers. The other river that flows from south to north is the Nile River. But that's due in part to the elevation in Africa, where it flows from south to the north. But these people who were remnants of both Atlantis and Mew, they are the ones that became known as the Mound builders. And in addition to them, we had the migration of the ancient Moabites, the Moabites who came from the land of Moab, who had come across the Atlantic as well, who were driven out of the land of Canaan. We met our brothers here, Islam, and founded these various civilizations that are in the Americas. But that's where we get the mound builder culture, where it flourished. So going up the Mississippi River, they eventually went into the Ohio River Valley and settled in the Ohio and the Northeast area. But the mound builders were not just simply in located in those areas. They also were in Illinois. Cahokia, Illinois was another area of the mound builders. Also in Alabama. We have the mounds there. But also here in North Carolina as well, we have mounds as well. So it was a wide network that consisted of the mound builder, what was known as the mound builder civilization. But so these would be these ancient Atlanteans, these ancient ones that came from Mew, these ancient Moabites. And we could say they was ancient Moabites as well, because in ancient times there was no O; it would have been a U anyway. So there's that's the connection right there, how they came together and formed these civilizations.
Islam. So is it safe that connects with the saying that, or the report that Prophet Noble Drew Ali told, that the Moors have been going up and down the Mississippi River before the European?
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
Came to America.
That's right. And from that sense, all of these would have been Moors. All of these people would be the Moors, known as what we call Moors today. He just specifically in chapter 47 showing us the migration of the ancient Moabites, how we came here as well. But these are our brothers and sisters. We came together, with those who was already here as well. So, but yeah, that's definitely ties to the statement of the prophet, how we were going up and down the Mississippi, a flourishing civilization. Much like the Nile River Valley had a civilization. The Mississippi River Valley had a civilization as well.
Islam. Now, when you mention the mound builders, it brings to mind the account of the Washita.
Right.
And we know about this, the record that exists, Return of the Ancient Ones.
That's right.
By Empress Verdiasi. So if you could expound just briefly on the Washita.
Right. Yeah. The Washita, Empress Verdiasi had retrieved records of the Washita. She had these records because they was kept in her family, and she preserved these records, gathered these records together, and basically resurrected the knowledge of the Washita Empire. And it's significant because of where they what actually composed that area of the Washita, the land of the Washita, would have been right in the area that is known as the Louisiana Purchase. That's very significant. It is the area between the Rocky Mountains and the Alleghenies. And that's very significant, historically, even with the United States history, in dealing with our people here in America. That area between the Rocky Mountains and the Allegheny was basically known as an area that was not part of the United States. And in the times of the 1800s, it was recognized that it wasn't part of the United States. So the Empress had resurrected that knowledge of who her people were, their family, and how long that they had been in that area. And they had the land titles to that land to prove it. And she presented all of that information and actually went to the United Nations and was recognized, as an indigenous nation here. So the Washita is a major component of those ancient ones here in the Americas. And according to my understanding and what I've seen, she also ties back to those colonists that had come from those ancient lands of Mute as well. So she ties back with that history as well. And so as was saying that, there were other mound building civilizations that had maintained contact with the Washita as well in other states that weren't part of that, Washita proper. But the ancient Moabites neophytes would have been the ones that had been and settled along the eastern seaboard, from Florida to Maine. We was along that eastern seaboard. So this is just part of these, the indigenous presence that our people had in the Americas. And what the Empress preserved is an actual record of this. So it's very significant as far as like that Washita history. And I think it's even more significant, putting it in its proper context right now, and going forward with that knowledge and that understanding of the Washita and what her intentions were with it, how she did succeed in getting it recognized. So I give honor to her and honor to that family.
Islam, absolutely, definitely honors to her and her family. Her works, that record is very powerful. Another record I wanted to talk on, and before I even say that, one of the things I love about your book is the fact that you give sources, you give a bibliography, and personally, I'm big on bibliographies. I like to know.
Right. Yes, sir.
Did an author actually do their research, or are they just going off the top of their head? But you definitely give your sources, and one of the sources you give is from P.B. Randolph. He's a popular topic on this show. Many of the authors who I interviewed, they have referenced him in some way, or shape, or form. So you have the record. You made reference to the book Pre-Adamites by P.B. Randolph. What is that book? If you can just go give an overview of the book and what made you go into that record in your research on this, in writing your book.
Right. Well, that's part of that esoteric historic tradition. Dealing with P.B. Randolph, when we start to look for these civilizations that go beyond 6,000 years, most of the history of these civilizations is basically compacted with 6,000 years. The establishment authors, they're slowly pushing Egypt back a little bit further each time, but for the longest time, Egypt just popped out of nowhere 4,000 BC. I mean, similarly with ancient Babylon, but with P.B. Randolph, he goes back and shows pharaohs and dynasties that go back 25,000 years, 35,000 years of Babylonian history, 35,000 years of Hindu history preserved in the Hindu cycles called the Yugas. And like I said, what led me to this is the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. When he tells us in chapter 2, he tells us that we measure time by cycle ages. So if we look back to what an age is, an age in astrological terms would be about 2,000 years, 2,160 years. So going back in time, you're talking about hitting many ages. And what age were we in at that particular time? So, for example, it has come out now that we're in the age of Aquarius. This is the age of Aquarius. 2,000 years ago, when Jesus of Nazareth was on the scene, it was the age of Pisces. Now, prior to that, it was the age of Aries. And prior to that would have been the age of Taurus. The age of Taurus would have put us in the time of the historical Adam. But there were ages before that, which would have continued on the dial plate. So from Taurus, it would have put us in Gemini. So when you go like 10,000 years, you're talking about 20,000 years. Where do you find that? And for me, that book was an excellent reference for that. finding these ancient records of history, and then going forward from there. So that was very important for this book. So when I started the book, I gave what I called an overview of ancient esoteric history, just to show, okay, that what we call Egyptian, because even Egyptian is a misnomer. That's a Greek word, just like Ethiopia means burnt or dark. So even when we talk about in ancient times, ancient history, we're not talking about things that are related specifically to the country Egypt we have today, the nation Egypt we have today. We're talking about basically the people who they have misnamed Egypt, who were these dark olive Asiatic people who were the mothers and fathers of civilization. They would have been the angels, the thoughts of Allah manifested in human flesh here on the planet Earth thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, some of whom would be known as God men and God women who had become deified and later worshipped as gods. Now, earlier we spoke about Libya, right? In Libya, one of the goddesses that was worshipped there was named Neith. She was a goddess. So many times these gods and goddesses, according to what I read in P.B. Randolph and some of these other authors, they were deified men, or women, but who actually lived and performed great deeds, but became deified. Now, the Holy Prophet Noble Jew Ali, he teaches the Moorish Americans a lesson. He says that man should not worship man. Praise Allah, the Holy One. So that's what we look to. We look to the Spirit. The Allah in man is what we look to. We look for to be one with Allah, be one with Almighty God. But like I said, to have a reference point is what was useful for P.B. Randolph's work. And see, using that reference point is what I use, by looking at the archaeological record over here. That's like one of the main things in this pamphlet is the archaeological record. And that the archaeological record, there's so much that has been suppressed archaeologically. And that's because it disturbs the paradigm, the European system, and especially in North America. You have archaeologists in South America who are dating history, dating civilizations in the Americas tens of thousands of years before what is accepted here in the Americas. And there's certain institutions in the Americas, they have the final say-so. And as Noble Jew Ali taught us about, many people go to school, many of our own people go to school, to the European schools, they just learn how to jump through the hoop better. Yeah, it is a hoop. It's something in these institutions. They don't want a lot of this light to come out. They don't want this light to come out. They're not revealers of the light. Noble Jew Ali is the revealer of the light. He's the one who brought us these true records. So in South America, they know more about the history here than what's being let out here in North America. That's what's significant, and how this ancient record, these ancient histories actually correspond to the archaeological dates that have been given by these archaeologists, who I call brave men and women, who are producing the dates associated with these sites, and many of them are in South America, but they've done research here in North America as well, and they are the ones giving us more closer evidence of the dates that correspond with these ancient histories, with these ancient dates that is given in works like P.B. Randolph or Plato, and especially our prophet, Noble Jew Ali.
Islam. Islam. So that brings me to this question in reference to the aspect of history, because you again, you're drilling on that esoteric history as opposed to exoteric history, which we know that the esoteric history is not really taught in the public school system, and just in general. So you mentioned about the hoop that a lot of us are forced to go through, dealing with as far as education. And what a lot of people don't know is that, you know, you yourself, you're not just a divine minister and a teacher in the temple. You are an educator. You're in the you have an educator background professionally, and you also mentioned that you studied under the late great Professor Ivan Van Sertima. So, Islam?
Islam, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So if you could kind of give some insight in terms of what you've witnessed in terms of that, you know, that being done as far as the European psychology in the educational system when it comes to history.
Islam, well, as you mentioned, like with Ivan Van Sertima, you know, I'm sure many scholars on who research our history. I mean, you gotta give Ivan Van Sertima honor. I'm sure that Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay give him honor. I'm sure that Minoko Rashidi will give him honor. But watching, like, even with Dr. Van Sertima, man, I mean, you're talking about attack. Wow. Yeah, attacked by the institution. Now, I'm not speaking about, you know, Rutgers University where he taught, but the institution of higher learning, so-called higher learning, what they call higher learning, you know, which in many instances really is not. It's completely censored, you know. Prophet Noble Ali said, you know, censor not your neighbor, you know. See, we call it Moorish Science. Exercise your five senses. Do your research and bring that to light. Investigate. But there's something about that in that you know, establishment that's not going to happen. I mean, even one of the things that I researched was a book mentioned by Professor Minoko Rashidi. I went to go hear him speak in Durham before, and he mentioned, you know, some of the records that he studied. And one of the records was a book called Men Out of Asia. And in that record, they talk about the prevailing paradigm dealing with ancient American history. The prevailing paradigm dealing with ancient American history basically says that, you know, there's no civilization that goes back beyond basically 9,000 years. They may go back as far as 16,000 years, but they definitely won't go back, you know, as far as what we're talking about tonight. You know, 30,000 years, 25,000 years, 50,000 years, dealing with, you know, first cataclysm that affected Atlantis, 20,000 years, the second cataclysm, 11,000 years, the last cataclysm. They're not gonna touch that. But in this book, Men Out of Asia, now this is a Harvard professor, and basically in his book, he didn't come out and say Moors, but what he used the term Negroes. He basically saying that, yeah, Negroes were over here first. You know what I'm saying? And even with him putting that out as a caricature of himself in the doghouse in his book, like wow. He knows, he says, yeah, this book put me in the doghouse. I mean, he has a picture of himself inside a doghouse in his book, and he's a Harvard professor. So showing he's a European. So that's just showing how close that demonstration is as far as, really revealing the light. Again, Ignatius Donnelly, man, he was a member of the House of Representatives of the United States. These books, this truth is known. This truth is known, but to get it out to the masses, and even through these ivory towers, these so-called, higher learning systems, it's something else. I mean, from what I've seen, rather than to look at the possibilities of ancient man, and by being a man, I mean male and female, existing hundreds of thousands of years ago in a civilized form. I'm not just saying living creatures. I'm talking about civilized, mothers and fathers of civilization, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Rather than look at that, they would tell you, okay, we talked about Mu. Another name for Mu is Lemuria. So, anthropologists, they're very slick on how they do it. Rather than, tell you about Lemuria or Mu, they would tell you about like the first creature that everything descended from. And they say in anthropology, and I just had to laugh when I saw it, that the first creature that everything descended from, including man himself, male and female, that we look at today, would be the equivalent of a squirrel that you see. A squirrel. That's what they teach. That's what they teach. And they call this squirrel or this rat-like or rodent creature lemur. Lemur. And they got lemurs today. But they saying that's what all humanity descended from. And that, Prophet Noble Jew Ali, Jesus and Barata Arabo, man, I'm like, who told you this? Who told you that man which is mine, Islam? Can you remember when you were 8 beasts or worm? The prophet, see, he's just raised us to a whole nother level. We just can't accept that demonstration, But that term Lima is significant because Lima is the root word of Lemuria.
Right.
Which is new.
Right.
So they hide things in plain sight, and we as Moorish Americans, we have the tools that we need. We have the tools in the workshop of the mind. We have to utilize these tools to read between the lines, and to go further. And that's what this record here, as I said, this is just an introduction. This is just an attempt. This is just something to aid Moors who may be searching along the same lines that I've looked at, And, in essence, this is what the prophet teaches us to do. On the back of our questionnaire, our authority, what's being done is we have to extend the learning and the teaching, the great prophet of Ali in America. We have to go beyond what these ivory towers, so-called ivory towers, that's what they call these Ivy League schools and these big schools and universities. We have to go far beyond them. And just watching Professor Van Sertima, the attacks that he got, I mean, good gracious, yes, attacked. But that Moor was strong. He met the attacks and he fought. He fought he fought to the end. I definitely give him honor.
Islam, yeah, definitely honors to Professor Ivan Van Sertima, because his works has inspired me definitely. They came before Columbus. That record, like you said, the editing of the Golden Age of the Moors, just the whole, and the video, which I think you can still see on YouTube, the Science of the Moors, very, very, very powerful.
Yeah. I get him high, man, because I read there's a few places where I actually see the words Moorish Science, which is not, in books or records authored by Moors, and that's one place. That's one of the several places where I saw that word in there. Moorish Science. That was in his book, right?
Indeed, indeed. And which brings us back to, of course, back to the prophet, who was the founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Moorish Holy Temple of Science.
Yes,
and so keeping that in mind, the significance of what we're talking here, which we just started just off of chapter 47 of our Moorish Holy Quran. In your view, how important is the aspect of teaching this science, or at the very least explaining that this science actually exists? How important is that teaching within the temple? And the reason why, before you even answer that, the reason why I'm even asking that is because there's a thought that is permeating throughout certain circles, particularly in social media, that the Moorish Science Temple of America is just all they about is religion, and they're like the church, etc.
Yeah, I think it's very important, to look deeply into into this. I think the prophet said it best. He says, "Know thyself and thy Father God Allah." So in that statement, "Know thyself" was put over all that the ancient schools. That was that's what when you walked into the ancient schools, the ancient temples, that was above it. Know thyself. And that is what Prophet Noble Drew Ali has instituted. He has instituted a system for divine instruction. And I just don't think anyone who is not a casual observer can not walk away from Moorish science and Islamism without a greater understanding of everything around them. I just don't see how that can be, because the Holy Quran teaches, it's remarkable how Noble Drew Ali, prophet, prepared, and he divinely prepared the Holy Quran. I mean, you learn about so many ancient religions, ancient systems, ancient ways of life. And in essence, you learn about he goes deep within it to the point where you learn about the good aspects, but you also learn about the negative aspects. Noble Drew Ali doesn't skip on that. When Jesus is taking his travels, he's going to meet the Buddhists, he's meeting the Hindus, and also in dealing with his own people, and dealing with the Israelites. You see the truth in those religions, in those systems, and you see the falsehood, because Noble Drew Ali teaches us about man. He teaches us about the nature of man. Man meaning male and female, but he teaches us that man that we see, that we come in contact with, the one that you hear talking now, is truth and falsehood strangely mixed. He teaches us about the true natures, and he teaches us, how to go to the root of things. And the root of things is truth. When he teaches us about the nature of Almighty God, no matter what name we call him, he is the rootless root. He's the cause rootless root from which all things have grown. I mean, that's not like dogma. That's not dogma, right?
Right.
That's not dogma. You know, he tells us in the Moorish literature what he's striving to do, and what those Moors who are following him. I'm striving to follow the prophet. But he's telling what those Moors that follow the prophet, he's saying that they are fortified by the impregnable doctrine built upon love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. As our brother Sheik Brother Page would say, the highest principles come to man. What principles are higher than that? And our brothers and sisters may mention other systems, and I would look at those other systems and say, okay, so you're saying those principles are the higher than love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice? But I say, when I look at your principles and that what you say is the best or the highest, that's what I see, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Because Noble Jew Ali said that all nations of the earth are seeking peace in these days, but there is only one way that peace may be attained. That is through love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice being taught what? Universally to all nations. So this is what Noble Joe Ali brought is universal. So I just don't see dogma in there. I don't see, boxed in demonstration. I just can't see that. I mean, the only way it could be is if, like I said, a person would have to be a casual observer. A person would have to be like, you would hand that person, that brother or sister, a Holy Quran or the Moorish Science of America, and they would be like, okay, how many pages is it? Okay. Oh yeah, I can read this in one day. Oh yeah, I'm done. You know what I'm saying? Right. They would, okay, 62 pages? And really, that casual observer, they're going to skip the divine cover. They're going to skip both aspects of the divine cover, inside and out. So they're not even going to get that. You know what I'm saying? So that's the casual observer. That's, yeah, I think, like the prophet say, he brought us something we can shout about, really and true. And that's the thing about what the prophet brought. I think about the book of Revelation. I think about the book sealed with 7 seals. I think about how the angel handed the brother the book. And the brother said in his mouth it was sweet as honey. But in his belly it was bitter. And I think that's what we have to get through with what the prophet gave us. We have to, we have to go beyond the sweet as honey. It sounds so sweet, sounds so good. But then we have to digest this truth of what the prophet gave us. And it's recorded, he said, regarding that, digesting this truth in terms of understanding, the prophet said it would take the Moors 50 years to figure out what he brought. So I know I'm still figuring out. I'm grateful. I'm grateful to what the prophet has done. I just hope others could, I guess they say, take a second look. If they think they got it from the first look.
Right.
I'll say, take another look.
Absolutely. I agree. Sheik. And as I like to say, some people just scan through our Moorish Holy Quran. They don't read it. And the reason why I say that is that in the very first chapter, and we talked about this before, and we're speaking right now, we've talked about time. In the very first chapter, the first statement is time never was when man was not. If you just take the time to ponder that statement, you're going to immediately realize that's not a dogmatic statement at all. The statement, to even ponder that statement, takes you on a whole, it takes you beyond what you've been dealing with. Just that's that one statement alone, and that's in the first chapter. So yeah, like you said, they definitely need to take a second look, and a third, and a fourth, and really need to meditate and reflect on these lessons, because it's a lot deeper than what we like to perceive. Like you said, just because it looks thin, you think that it's the content is not as vast, when it's more vast than you can even imagine within that little statement. It's like I'm just recalling my memory. A brother said, I was watching an interview, and he said, truth is simple. That's why a lot of your wise words, your wise sayings, are just a few words. They're not long, drawn out paragraphs, because truth is simple. It's just that we in our ego, we want to make it more elaborate and complex. But even within the truth, and this is me saying it, because the truth is simple, doesn't mean that you're supposed to underestimate it or neglect it, because it's so simple you can pass right by it. And it's simple but profound. It digs deep into the essence of who you really are. When you say a simple statement, such as time never was when man was not, or when we speak about the higher self, truth cannot pass, truth cannot change nor pass away, right? All these different statements that Prophet put in that questionnaire, those simple statements carry so much deeper than, it causes you, as you mentioned, to, if you're a true seeker, to extend the learning.
That's right.
And that's what it's about. So definitely praise Allah for you doing the work and contributing to the extending of the learning. Is for the people out there who are listening, is there a way they can get your book? Is there a website or email address they can reach you at?
Yeah, email. Sure, they can email me. Email me at stone_el@hotmail.com, and I'll send you the pamphlet, send you the book. Definitely consider it a pamphlet, and hopefully, we'll be continuing. I'm still doing some more research on it, where I can, produce some more of what I've been finding, what Allah's blessed me with, and what my teachers have blessed me with, to help share this understanding. And I'd be happy to send the pamphlet out to you. So feel free. That's Stone, STONE_EL@hotmail.com.
Islam. I just put it in the chat, and that's for everybody out there. Definitely send them an email, reach out, get this book. It's a powerful book. Powerful. He said it's a pamphlet, but it reads like a book. It's compact. It's a lot of information and references for you to continue your studies. So thank you, Sheik, for getting on the show.
Praise Allah. Thank you, brother, man. Thank you. All the great work you're doing, and continue to do. I want to give Islam to all the Moorish Americans, man, because we are living in trying times, man. We got to remember the bond that unites us. I just want to say that we got to continue and remember the bond, and let's strengthen the bond that unites us as Moors. Islam.
All right, Sheik. Peace and love.